right. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to a new episode of 6 Feet Under Exhumed. I am Kari the Mortician.
I'm Faith, that mortuary professor. We are starting episode 5 of season 1 of 6 Feet Under. So we're rewatching the entire series, and today we're going to talk about episode 5.
It's called An Open Book. And this one I've been waiting for because I remembered, maybe because it's boobs everywhere. Yeah. And that's why I remembered this episode. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know where in the first season it was. So we start with the lovely, I can't remember her name. Oh my gosh.
Vivica St. John or Vivica,
is that what it's Vivica something. And she's getting ready for a date, talking to her cat and talking about the man she's going to go on a date with. And you see these pinup pictures all over. You don't realize they're actually her from her heyday of being a porn star. And we kind of find that out later. But so there are a lot of her boobs in this episode that are shown, but she ends up getting electrocuted because her cat kicks her
radio
curlers.
Was it her curlers?
It's her curlers. Oh, yeah. I was thinking it was radio too.
But radio. It is. It's those electric curlers.
Right. And she gets electrocuted and dies. So that's kind of the start of all of this. And she is just herself, that such a personality. And I wish she as a character was, kind of talking more in it, because she is so sassy and she's like, I am such a hot biatch getting ready, and he's going to be so lucky that he's going out with me. And I'm like, oh, can you give me some of that kindness? Because
some of that,
girl, get it
right? Yeah,
get it. So,
it's really something. And then she's down in the prep room, and they're getting her ready, and David has no idea who she is.
Not a clue. He's meeting with they never even say who this man is, but he is someone who's in the eulogy says, I was lucky enough to ever have slept with her.
Yeah.
He's paying for everything for this funeral. And he's like,
maybe he's like her manager or something.
Maybe. But he's like, don't you know who she is? And David's like, of course. And we will give her the star treatment. And then, he goes to the preparation room and is like,
no idea.
Who is this?
Yeah. And then Nate comes down and sees her and is like, hey, oh my God, that's this porn star. And then him and Rico are talking about like all this stuff that she would do on her videos. And it's pretty entertaining.
They go through the whole she did 30 guys on one thing and blah, blah, blah. And then they're looking at her breasts because she has fake breasts, but one is still large and
ahead,
perky, and the other is deflated to the side almost. They never say what's going on, but one is very much migrated. And so that becomes a discussion throughout as to how are they going to do this, because they say absolutely no bra. We want her shown and them to be amazing. And so Federico's restoration this time is having to make these breasts, because they are characters themselves throughout this episode, is how to make these breasts perfect.
How to make them not like one's like this and one's like
because they're crazy. When you just look at them, but it's life. It's what happens. Like perfect boobs do not.
Well, when you lay down anyway, they're gonna go into your armpits. They don't. I mean, even if they are fake, there's still gravity,
right? So that becomes, I love this episode because it is a sexual episode in some ways, but it's not the main focus, but it's this little underlying, because she's a porn star, and then the funeral is going to have this porn star theme-y kind of thing to it. And, then we got, I want to say Rachel, but that's her name in real life. Brenda and Nate, and he goes to visit her at her parents' house, and she's in the pool. So then they're all in the pool, starting to get busy when the parents show up. And so he gets to meet the parents, who are these
psychiatrists.
Not famous, but they are supposedly kind of
well-known, successful, whatever, psychiatrists. And they have this nice house, and they're just really, really strange people. But I don't know.
It's Bo Derek. Isn't it Bo Derek?
No.
Who is that?
The mother?
Yeah, she's.
Isn't Bo Derek dead?
No.
Oh,
I think she just died. We're going to have to. Oh, of course. Now we're IMDb'ing this.
Yeah, someone is screaming at us right now.
Okay, we'll look that up on the side. But yeah, so they're there, and actually, I think
Joanna Cassidy is her name.
The lady. She was in my babysitter's dead. Don't tell mom the babysitter's dead or whatever. I think.
Was she? She was in Dallas.
Oh, yeah. She played, I think, the boss in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, I feel like.
Maybe.
Oh, how did you look that up so fast?
Googled it. I mean, hold on. You can't do anything without
I'm going to totally dive into this. She reminds me of Bo Derek, though. But no, I don't think Bo Derek's dead because she dates, she's with Aiden from 6 Feet Under. Or not 6 Feet Under.
Sex in the City?
Yeah.
Bo Derek?
I think so.
Maybe. Joanna Cassidy has been in, oh my gosh, so many things. This is all TV.
Derek, here we go. We're diving in. We're taking a sideways turn to Bo Derek. Yeah, she's been with John. She married John Corbett in 2020.
How old is Bo Derek?
Yeah, that's crazy.
She's got to be in her 70s.
Oh, Bo Derek, yeah, she's a bit older. She was born in well, I don't know, her main movie was in 1979, that 10 movie. Let's see, when was she born? I currently have 4 10-year-old little girls running around my house. Oh, she was born in 1956. So 40, 50, 60.
She's almost 70.
Yeah, she looks hella good for that.
So Joanna Cassidy was in NCIS. She was, oh my God, so many other things. I'm just going to list the things I've even heard of. Law and Order.
So many.
Kiss the Bride, The Grudge, Ghost Whisperer, Criminal Minds, Bones, Boston Legal, Ooh. 6 Feet Under.
That's wild.
God. A bunch of stuff. Just like, so many.
Well, there you go.
Things, yeah.
Thought they were.
Blade Runner.
One and the same. That's not one and the same, but I thought that's who it was for a second. But yeah, so we meet these parents, and it's
Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead.
Yeah, she was on that one. Anyway, we took a huge sideline. Oh my goodness. Sorry, guys. Segue, sideline, left turn, whatever you want to call it. But so, yeah, we meet the parents and they're like, let's have a drink. And then, they hang out a little bit and stuff. And we find out later that, the mom and dad tell him later in the episode because he shows up to go to dinner over there and Brenda's not there.
Yeah, they invite him to dinner and he assumes that Brenda's going to be there, and then he goes to have dinner at their house and she's not
there. And her parents say, do you not understand she's a master manipulator? Like, everything that happens is because she wants it to happen that way. Like, you didn't show up at the house that day and us surprisingly show up. Like, she wanted you here because she knew we were coming home. And you didn't show up for dinner without her having planned that. Like, she lays it all out specifically for reasons. And we find out she is a genius, like over 180 IQ. And she has written this wild book, or this book is written around her.
There's a book written about her. About what she was like as a child, but I thought that was, I couldn't imagine just telling somebody saying that about my own child, even if it was true. Like I was like, dang.
It's a weird, obviously family dynamic.
It is weird, but it kind of already sets the tone for the family, for that family and those dynamics. Cause you're like, who do you even believe?
Yep. It's a little odd, all of it.
It's very strange. And and then they talk about, so the episode before, we neglected to mention that Nate notices that Brenda has a tattoo.
That was like the first or second episode.
Yeah.
A Nathaniel tattoo.
It was a tattoo that says Nathaniel. And so when he's at dinner, he asks her parents if that name has any significance, because it's his name and he thinks it's weird. And it turns out that it's a character from this book series, Nathaniel and Isabel, that was one of her favorite book series as a child. So she did not get a tattoo of Nate's name. Because
but then we find out later, we'll just fast forward on this storyline to the end. He shows up at her house. I mean, so he calls her his girlfriend at one point because she's like, what are we even doing? And she can't really say it. Her non-committal is like, oh, we're just screwing, we're doing whatever. And he's like, you're my girlfriend kind of thing. But then they get back to her house after that and they walk in and out walks Jeremy Sisto in this towel that how did they get it to stay so perfectly so low on him? I'm not quite sure.
I don't know. It's very,
And she ignores the fact that there's this half naked man standing there, doesn't introduce him to Nate.
Yeah. She's like, oh, okay, bye.
And she just walks into the other room.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, how are you? And Nate's like, I'm good, thanks. Basically, and we find out it is her brother. And this is our first introduction to her brother. And then when he turns to walk away, we see that he has the other name of the book title. What was it? Isabel?
Nathaniel and Isabel.
And he has Isabel on his back and she has Nathaniel on her back. So it's kind of a brother-sister tattoo thing.
Yeah.
She used to read the book to him and all of this. So all of that kind of comes oh.
But it's weird because it's it's normal, but it's not at the same time. You still you're like, oh, okay, that's her brother. It's not some boyfriend or some other man that, and the name Nathaniel's from a book, but it still just feels off. So it does a really good job of showing you the other brother and sister. They, it's nothing crazy, but it's still something crazy. It's just not the crazy that you thought.
Yeah, it feels a little icky. Something feels icky there. So they set it up for that storyline. That's really how it ends, that whole episode. But that's kind of that storyline arc across that is, the parents are introduced. And then, so we find out all this about Brenda. Brenda really opens up in this episode and we find all this stuff. So at the beginning, last episode, Ruth had said, David, now that your father is dead, you really need to take me to church once in a while.
After she gives him $93,000. Right. Really smart.
You should take
What's he going to do? Say no?
Exactly. And so she kind of guilts him into it. But I think it's also an interesting old archaic that you need to escort the widow to church.
Yes.
So I kind of love that she is so prim and proper old school in some ways, but then other ways she is so saucy.
She is just repressed. I mean, you can tell she doesn't want to be the way she is, but that's just how she was brought up to be, but it's not really who she really is. And so it's
Ruth on the open road and see what happens. That's what I think is going to happen with Ruth. But and then we're at church, we run into Tracy, crazy Tracy. So she does come back in this storyline and we don't know the full motive, if she's just hitting on David, if she's stalking him.
It feels like she's kind of stalking him a little bit. I mean,
she keeps showing up where he is.
Keeps showing up wherever he is and not where other people are. So I feel like maybe she thinks that he's just some single guy and
hot single man on the prowl.
Yeah, I guess that's probably it. But
and she says something either she says, are you taken? And he says, yes. Or I have a girlfriend, or do you have a girlfriend? And he says, yes, that's it, or something. And she says, oh, well, people, our age, it's hard to find people because they're either gay or taken, but
Yep.
I guess at least you've got a girlfriend and you're not gay.
Yeah.
That's a crazy laugh or whatever she says. So yeah, well, it's like, is she coming back again? Is she not? But you already said last time that somebody's going to die in her family. So that'll be
Yeah, she does come back a couple of times. I don't remember when, but she's not gone forever.
Oh, she's such a great character. She's so funny.
She is.
She was on an episode of NCIS, I remember back in the day. And I always think of that whenever I see the two is because that's the only other thing I remember her ever being on or seeing her in. And so she plays crazy so good in this show. It's so fun. So yeah, they ask him to be a deacon, and then he goes to his man and is like, hey, maybe I should do this. It's good for business. And he's like, yeah, but do they know you're gay? And I don't know. And so it becomes another big conversation about when are you going to be comfortable with who you are? When are you going to not hide it? And we already go to church together. Yep. You know, why don't we just keep going there if you're not accepted?
Yeah, it's difficult, you know, in queer relationships when one person is out and the other person isn't or doesn't want to be as out, I guess. And so it's definitely realistic, you know, especially back then. It was different even 20 years ago. And just to kind of see that David wants to be out. And he does things that, you know, show that that's the direction he's moving, but he still has a lot of conflicting feelings. And I think they handle this really well, you know, honestly, because they don't make David the bad guy for feeling the things that he feels. You know, he was raised in a traditional home. He's a member of a traditional church. He has what we would consider a traditional job, even though there's a lot of gay people in funeral service, if you didn't know.
Many.
I mean, we're everywhere, but we're there too. And so, you know, it just, I think they handle it well because they don't make him seem like they really show that struggle without it being, you know, he's a jackass for not just being this way, because those are really, really difficult, you know, things. You know, especially 20 years ago, even, you know, it's different even 20 years ago. And Keith is a lot farther along in his, you know, being comfortable with who he is. And so you can really empathize with both characters because, you know, David is just not sure how that's going to implode his life. And he has all these fears that things are going to, you know, there's going to be consequences to it. And Keith has already gone through that and already lived that. And he is tired of having to continuously come back to that stage of, you know, coming out as a gay person, and he's beyond that and he just wants to live his life. And so they're just in different places with it. And, you know, it's handled well, I think.
Well, and David has had to play this role for so long. And I think that's the best way to say it is because he's had to be the dutiful son and the businessman and the funeral director staying in the corner with your hands crossed, you know, running things silently from the back, and the son who stays around and is going to take over the business and does all the right things and attends the right church and speaks to the right people. But he also is somebody who wants to be in a relationship and be in love. But I think he feels like he has to choose one or the other and isn't quite there. And so he does come out to Nate in this episode because Nate and Brenda see him and Keith out together. And he says, oh, aren't you guys partners? And David takes, you know, Keith's hand and says, yes, we are partners. And he's like, oh, and like Brenda walk away.
Doesn't know what to say. And then he's like, I think David's gay. It's like, really?
And Brenda's like, did you get a look at the man he is with? Right? Like, yum, kind of thing. But then later at church, after he gets appointed as a deacon, and now he has to play this new dutiful role, Nate says, hey, where's Keith? And he goes, why would he be here? He's just my friend.
Right. Yep.
And it's like, one step forward, 5 steps back. And it's, you know, you just keep waiting for him to fully embrace and waiting for that to get there. but it's just not going to happen very soon for him. I think we're going to really battle this battle for a while. And God bless Keith for having any patience for him.
Oh, yeah.
Because he is a good looking officer, wears a uniform. I mean, he could go out and move on quite easily. But yet we're going to sit here and, struggle along with David for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So
I think he was afraid that someone would overhear that at church, because when Nate asked where Keith was, they were at church. And I think that was like, he was like, oh my God, don't say that here.
Yeah. Like, don't bust him out.
Yeah. It was kind of sad. You know, so see that when he's in the interview though. So he's being interviewed, about, being a deacon by the priest. And I don't know who the other guy is, I don't know who he is, but some somebody else in the church. I don't know what you know what I mean? Is he?
Yeah. I think he's just from the board, they said, or something.
Is he from the board? Somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, is there anything else you think we should know about you? And David's just like, is there something you want to ask me? So it's kind of this like implication that they suspect.
Yeah.
But they want to give him an option to tell them, but he's not going to tell them, but he'll give them the option to ask. And it's kind of just like this standoff, Is there anything you want to tell us? And he's like, no. Is there something you want to know? And they're like, no. And that's it,
Yeah, it's like they're challenging him, but he's challenging them back, and nobody wants to say it.
Yep.
Now we go into then the Ruth and Claire relationship a lot in this episode too. And I love it because it really develops and grows, but it's not in the way any normal, I guess it is more normal than the other, but so Ruth shows up and says, I rented some videos. Let's watch some videos together.
Tapes
and she pops out, the VHS tapes. And I was like, oh my goodness, the VHS tapes. And, she says, that's just not going to be us, Mom, kind of thing. And then Ruth comes back around later and she says, pack your bags, we're going. And she's like, where are we going? And they're going to, it's her cousin's house.
They're going to visit her cousin somewhere.
And they go to this cousin's house, and it is a mom and daughter duo. The mom is divorced from the daughter's dad, and they are gag me almost to like perfectly. Oh, I love you and we're perfect together, and we're going to go to spin class, and we don't eat our carbs, and we're the best of friends, and I love living with my mom, and I love this. And Claire and Ruth are both looking at each other like,
what in the hell is wrong with these people?
Like, ew. Like, in theory, that sounds like a good relationship until you actually see it, and it's just almost too much. And it kind of comes out, they ask Ruth and Claire, oh, how are you guys doing since the death? And she says, I'm sad, basically, and kind of talks. And then her cousins, oh, yeah, it was really hard for me, but my daughter pulled me out of it. And she's like, yeah, but he's not dead. Like, he can be at her dad's going to be at her wedding and at her graduation. And if you need to call him, he's there. Like, my husband's dead. He's gone. Claire has no father. There's nobody to walk her down. Like, kind of lays it out in the cousins like, yeah, but it is really kind of the same.
I think people think that until they experience it.
Yeah.
I think that when people say that, they are trying to say something good. It's coming from a good place. They're trying to make the person feel like they're understood. Or like their feelings are, are seen and heard. But oftentimes the way that people do that doesn't land, because it's not the same, it's just not. And, so, I mean, it's just kind of another thing in the show that they do so well, is they show how people that are in grief are treated by other people who think that they're saying the right things and doing the right things, but it doesn't quite have the effect they think it's going to have. Because, this cousin is trying to make Ruth feel like she understands and she's got support, and
you could get through it. Look at us. We got through it.
But it's not, it's like when you have someone that has a miscarriage and you say, oh, well, but you can have other children, or I had, you know what I mean? It's, this or this. And it's like, you don't have to, when you're talking to somebody that's grieving, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to tell them what happened in your life that's similar. You don't have to, unless it's identical, you don't have to tell them. They don't need to hear that they're going to be better in time. That's not what they need.
Your job is
And
not to fix their situation or make
yeah,
them feel better. Just make
yeah,
them not feel alone by just
yeah.
being present with them. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you overtalk, not
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, most of the time, people overtalk and they
Mm-hmm.
say hurtful things.
Yeah.
And you're not meaning to be hurtful. And that's one thing, like when I meet with some families, depending on the scenario, I'll say, people are going to say things to
Yep.
you. They're going to sting and they're going to hurt. And you're going to wonder why they're being hurtful in this moment. But they're saying things because they're trying to help you. They're trying to love on you. And there are no right words.
Yeah.
And so everything sounds like the wrong words because there's no right words, but
There's no
people
right
just keep
words.
talking and they're like, yeah, you wouldn't believe what so-and-so said. And I'm like, they're
I
not
wouldn't
trying to
believe
hurt
it. They're
you. They're
not. Yeah.
just, they're trying to connect with you. They're trying to love you somehow. And it's all comes out wrong. I'm like, so you just have to have grace with other people because they're uncomfortable with the situation, especially if it's a baby or if it's,
Yeah.
something a little extra like that. They don't know what to do. And yeah, and so you see that and they're like, it's fine. Tomorrow we'll get up and go to the 6 a.m. spin class and you'll be fine. So then we see Ruth and Claire literally sneaking out of the house and
I
running
love
to the
that.
green
That's
hearse
exactly what my daughter and I would do. We'd
at
be like,
like
no, bye.
5:30 a.m.
Absolutely.
Yup, like get up. We gotta go. And so they
Absolutely.
they bond through the, oh my God, we don't want to be like them
Yes.
thing. And they have that discussion when they get home, basically like, we're never going to have that relationship, but it's okay. We don't want that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, you can be the people you are and still, I go through, my daughter's 8. I go through that with her because I am not a traditional mom and she is a very precocious 8-year-old. And like, the things, excuse me, that like her friends and their moms do, like we would be miserable. And
Yeah.
instead of trying to, and I tried all that, when she was little, I took her to dance and gymnastics and all that, all that stuff. And she hated it and I hated it. And, and now it's very, I resonate a lot with that because it's more about being the people that you are and
Mm-hmm.
having the relationship, that you are. So we do the things that we like to do, and it may not be what other mothers and daughters like to do, but it's still just about having that relationship. And so it's cool to see like Ruth and Claire just kind of be like, we can have a good relationship but still be authentic to who we are. We don't, it doesn't have to look like going to spin class
That,
and being on a
yeah.
diet and weighing each other and all the crazy stuff.
Well, and Claire's going to the therapist during the course of this because I think her mom is at the therapist one of the days with her, and then she's at the therapist at the end. Kind of where her arc in this one ends is she's telling the therapist, my mom's sad, like she's so sad. And you see her viewing her mom at one point and she's off in the other room and she's just looking at her and she looks lost and she looks sad, and you can see Claire, I think it finally resonates with her, like the pain her mom is going through.
Right. Yeah.
And she tells the therapist that like, my mom is sad and I don't know what to do. And that is hard for me. And I've said this last week, and I've read it a couple of times online recently, that we have to remember that as we're living our lives, our parents are living their first time as well. So this is the first time your parents are doing what they're doing as well. So if they're in new relationships, if they're going through a loss, if they're what you think is messing up, this is their first time doing all of it. So just because you believe your life is, oh, but you don't know what it's like to be me. Nope. But you don't know what it's like to be them. And this is their first time parenting a 15-year-old and 2-day, kid. So give them some grace for what they're doing because they're doing the best they possibly can in the moment they're in. And so I just think of that and I'm like, God, if every kid could hear that and understand that at a young age, but
there's
you
got
don't
to
until
come a
you're
time.
older.
Yeah. Until you're older, there's got to, and I would say they're for most people, there comes a time where you see your parents as just people, you know, and not these figures of absolute, you know, everything. And it's just funny because, you know, like I said, my daughter's 8 and I don't think she realizes that I'm a person yet. I think she just thinks that I exist to serve her, you know. And so it's, you know, that day I think comes for all of us when we're like, oh, our parents are just people also. They don't inherently have all this, you know, they don't know everything. They're just doing the best they, you know, that they can. And that's why I love that relationship so much, because it shows that you know, that Ruth is just a person. And it shows her children realizing that, you know, along the way, that she's not just this figure that is, like I say, you know, I sometimes I still think my 8-year-old thinks that I just exist to wait on her hand and foot, and that I don't have my own like life or things that I have to do too, you know.
It takes becoming a parent, I think, sometimes to
does.
realize that.
Yeah.
Like, there's moments I think about, like, taking my kid and dropping them off to college, and I literally can't even. And so I want to just, every single time I'm like, and maybe I should, when I have those inklings, like, send my mom a text or call her and say, how did you ever let your little babies go off to school by themselves? Because that's a very scary little world out there. I'm just like, I can't imagine all these moments that you have to go through, I think, as a parent, and how my mom and dad did it, or the times that I yelled, I hate you to them.
Yes.
And now having kids that, you know, why are you ruining my life? Or why won't you this? Or, you know, or the because I said so, which I love saying, but I remember as a kid, parents saying that and thinking that's such BS. But you then say it later, and how I want to apologize for everything I did back in those days, because you realize later, like, my parents had this whole life that was going on, and they put so much aside for us. And I think Claire realizes some of that, and realizes outside of herself some of life that is going on, which I think is amazing to, I don't know, they really just represent so many big emotions and big things in the show that.
No, they really do. And, you know, it's, I don't know, like you hear yourself say these things that your parents said, and you're like, oh, wow, my mother's voice or my father's voice just came out of my mouth. You know, like Helena, she gets very dramatic about very, very minor inconveniences. And I'm just like, it gets a lot worse, girl. Like, you know, yeah, your favorite sweater isn't clean, but there's a lot worse that's going to happen to you today than that.
You have a sweater to put on.
Yeah.
Be happy, because.
But I remember that too. Damn it. If I couldn't wear the shirt I wanted to wear to school that day, I could have just, I mean, I didn't want to exist.
Yeah. Like, I had a plan and you've ruined it.
I know.
My whole life. My whole life is over right now. Well, let's talk porn star funeral for a second. So this porn star has died. We now have her funeral, and it is as amazing as you want it to be. My favorite is that Christina from Grey's Anatomy is her best friend co-star in this funeral, and is like, you spot her in the crowd, and I'm like, wait.
There's a lot of actors and actresses in this show that
it's just like, oh my
famous
gosh.
later, you know.
So then she gets up and talks and says a little eulogy at the funeral, and then David is meeting another family from the church, because they've already sent him business from the church, and he's meeting with them behind just a little curtain that opens into the chapel. So I'm like, why would you meet where they can overhear everything?
It's bad design of a funeral home.
I'm like, what the heck? And she pops in and she goes, her tits look amazing. Great job. And he's like, okay. And he handles it well. And like carries on and goes and shows her back in and carries on and stuff. But it was just kind of funny. And so, yeah, Nate goes to Federico and says, what did you do with her boobs? Like, how did you make them? And he says, cat food cans. And it's like, first of all, illegal, guys. These are terrible, terrible choices.
That's not it.
garbage. You don't put garbage with the deceased. Great ingenuity, but you have to do that without putting cat food cans in the.
That is not how it's really done. There are different ways that it is done, but it is not done with cans, because once you embalm somebody, they will stay in that general position. So you have to position the crooked boobs before you embalm, and then they kind of, set up like they're supposed to. And you can use different ways of doing that. But they're not gonna just be putting cans under somebody's boobs.
No cat food cans.
No.
Terrible idea. But this whole episode ends with, it's a scene actually of Nate and Brenda.
Mm-hmm.
And they're having this little discussion about God, or, higher power and everything. And Brenda says, like, life is basically worthless, and I just try and forget that every day. And she like walks away, and he's like,
yeah,
what? And so you see that he believes in a higher power. He never really says it's God, but he believes in
something,
a bigger power that is over everything. And she basically is like, I'm just here in this meager existence until it's done. And then that's it. And so I try and forget that.
Yeah.
And so that's it. And it's like mic drop, and she walks away from the conversation. So I don't know if that'll become bigger for them or not. I guess we'll see how it plays out. So much of this, it's been a couple years since I watched it. So I love that I remember bits and pieces, but I also don't remember a lot of it.
Yeah, I think it serves really to show just the fundamental differences in their outlooks of life.
Yeah.
Because that really just is a constant theme in their relationship throughout the show, is that they just fundamentally see everything differently.
So different.
Nate's a lot more, not religious, but, spiritual and more connected with things. And Brenda's kind of just
free spirit, live in the moment.
Just doesn't really believe in anything or have any connection really, to things the way that Nate does. And just kind of so it kind of closes with that, where it's kind of a downer, of like, oh wow, this is a pretty major difference between them. Mm-hmm. Just, their complete difference in life outlooks,
Yeah. So I'm excited to see next episode, like what the death is in the beginning and who it is. Cause the last two have been so great, and they've been kind of saucy because the Fishers are really not scraping the whole bottom of the barrel, but they're taking any call that comes along. And Ruth even questions that and says, why are we doing these calls? And they're like, we got to pay for things. And these people are paying us. Why not? And so will the church stuff bring more mainstream funerals? Are we still going to get some like saucy stuff? Kind of how is that going to change? So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that all plays out and what characters and situations come along next. So
I kind of like, and just one more thing, I kind of like that they don't sleep on the fact that it's a business. Mm-hmm. They do, David, mostly, but, they do bring, conversations and have conversations and, about the fact that they have to make money or they don't have a business.
Yep.
And I think that's important. And I'm glad that they do that in this show, because I do think it's important that people watching realize that it is a small family business. There is no we don't get payment from the government. Yeah. We don't get payment from the city. We don't get payment from anybody other than the families that we're serving. And if you can't be profitable, you don't exist to be there for those families. And I think that's just kind of one of those little parts of funeral service that people get the ick about, because it's like, well, how can you charge people money when when somebody dies and they're going through this terrible time? And it's like, because it costs money to do the job. Everything we do, somebody has to pay for. It's not a charity, and it's there is no magical funeral, funding out there that we get from anyone.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Wouldn't it be nice? And
I would enjoy that.
That's one of those things I love teaching, in mortuary school is, hey, Social Security doesn't pay for funerals. Guess what? Veterans, they don't pay for your funeral. So if you're listening to this and you are a person, that is considering looking into things, for yourself, look into it now, because, how many veterans families have you met that go, well, the VA is going to pay for the service and the casket. They do not.
Saddest thing.
They think that because they served in the military, that they have funeral benefits, and there are some, but they're reimbursement based, if anything. So the family has to pay first.
Minor.
And it's very minor. And so that's, I guess there's my PSA, Kari, for watchers and listeners, please look into these things. That's one of the hardest parts about being a funeral director, I would say, is how often we have to tell families that have assumed that their funerals are going to be paid for because they're a veteran, or because Social Security, or because they work for the railroad, or because whatever. And that stuff, that's an urban legend that does not exist.
Yeah.
So, that I appreciate that they in the show that this is a business, and we only exist,
and it's not like we're praying people will die for the business. People die, we're hoping they call us.
Sure.
That's what I always say, because people are like, oh, so you want people to die so you can pay your bills? I'm like, no, they're dying. I just want them to call us.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's not like I want extra people to die.
No, not at all. I mean, it's like anything else, it's a service business that people and people can choose who they use. You're not required to use a particular funeral home.
Yeah.
And it's just like any other business. If I'm going to go to any other service business, I'm going to find one that I like and that I feel comfortable with, and you have the same rights as a funeral consumer to do that too. I think where people kind of get off on this idea that we're predatory or that we're doing something wrong is because they don't want to spend money on something unexpected like that.
Exactly.
So, but that doesn't mean that we're predatory, or that you have choices, you have options, and that again, just PSA, you'll probably hear it from me a lot during this rewatch. Do your research, look into funeral homes in your area, find out what benefits you do and don't have, because I think you'll be surprised. And I've hated so many times having to tell families, I realize that your dad served 2 years in the military in the 60s, but nothing's paid for. They don't pay for that. He can be buried in the National Cemetery, but no, all funeral services are the responsibility of the family. So,
I had somebody tell me recently that because their loved one was a veteran, they were getting more Social Security. And I've never heard that. Have you heard that?
I've never heard that. I take and I've been trying to say it nicely, but I take what families tell me as it's based in truth, but it's probably wrong, because here's what happens. This is also something that happens a lot to us as funeral directors. We've gone through school, most of us. We have done this, we're experts in these things. But what we get faced with is, well, my neighbor Sarah's husband's cousin's friend from high school's 3rd grade teacher said when he died 60 years ago in another state, in another part of the country, that it went like this. So I know that's how it's supposed to be. Yeah. So you're facing all this lore that people come in with, that their friends have told them, or somebody has told them. But because they know that person, they trust that person, right? And so whatever they tell them is true, and most of the time it's inaccurate. Well, when my cousin died, his whole funeral was paid for by the VA. That's what my aunt's sister's grandma's neighbor's sister's dog's groomer told me.
Don't know what to tell you.
So just be careful.
The groomer.
Well, you know what I mean? If you're hearing stuff out there from your friends, your neighbors about things, take it worth a grain, because it's probably not accurate, because they don't know, get the real information from the real experts is all. So I've never heard that. I don't think that's right. Maybe, but who knows? There's all kinds of individual situations, but, most of the time when people tell me, well, this is how it was, I'm going, that's maybe how you think it was or how you remember it, but
not quite true.
Probably not.
Well, thank you guys for joining us for another episode.
Yeah.
Check us out next week for episode, gosh, where are we? Next week will be, this is 6.
Well, this is 5, so the next one will be 6.
Well, it'll be episode 6, but it'll be our 7th because our intro was,
right.
That's going to throw me off, I think, the whole time. But
episode 6 of the show. Yeah, our 7th recap.
Right? 7th recap. Yeah.
All right.
Hope you guys are liking these and watching along with us. So comment below, share the video if you are excited to follow along and want other people to follow along with you. Check out all our social media for that mortuary professor, for Kari the Mortician. We do have an Instagram page for 6 Feet Under Exhumed. So if you want to follow along there as well. And we'll see you guys on the next one.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.